Setting records in the NFL is quite an accomplishment. But sometimes when you start to look at the nitty-gritty details of a couple of these numbers, you might get the urge to slap an asterisk next to them.
Sacked by Michael Strahan. It almost looked like it was a design play. They're buddies. You gotta be kidding.
They say that records, like rules, are made to be broken. But some of them just shouldn't be broken. They should be removed from the record books immediately. So today, let's take a look back at 10 players whose records should be wiped out of NFL history immediately. Norm Van Brocklin, the single-game passing yards record. This record dates all the way back to 1951. For those who are unfamiliar with the two-time NFL champion and one-time MVP, he played in the NFL from 1949 until 1960 for the LA Rams and Philadelphia Eagles, then continued on as a coach for the Vikings and Falcons. As with many of the careers that took place back then, it's challenging to contextualize Van Brocklin's resume. But what is unfair to say is that he is the rightful record holder for single-game passing yards. Not only did he allegedly rack up these numbers against a now entirely defunct organization, the New York Yanks, but there is no tape from this game, and who knows how accurate they were at tracking stats back then. I mean, we know that they blew out the Yanks, but this kind of number simply makes no sense considering the era he played in. It does feel like a matter of time until we see someone come along and break it. I mean, Joe Burrow was close in 2021, racking up 525 yards through the air in Week 16 against the Ravens. So maybe we don't need to yank it out of the record books manually. Man, I really feel like we should. Now, not to make this video all about denigrating the NFL players of yesteryear, but while we're on the subject, we may as well yank Bill Groman's single-season rookie receiving yards record out of here too. I get it, it's great. As a first-year player, he recorded 1,473 receiving yards. Awesome! But you know what else he did? He played in the early 1960s in the AFL before the merger even took place. He never even had any legitimate aspirations to become a professional athlete. After finishing up his college career at the little-known Heidelberg University, he started a career as an 8th grade science teacher. And he didn't get noticed until he just so happened to have a catch in the schoolyard with one of his fellow teachers' husbands, Bob Snyder, a former coach in the NFL. What exactly was the level of play like in the AFL at the time if you could just scoop up a middle school teacher out of the schoolyard, line him up out wide, and have him put up those kind of numbers? We cannot possibly let a record from a completely different league continue to stand in the NFL. Similar to Van Brocklin's record, I wouldn't be surprised to see one of today's increasingly impressive rookie receivers break that record. After all, it is a 17-game season now, and we have seen a couple of guys come close over the past couple of years. Jamar Chase got to 1,455 in 2021, and Justin Jefferson knocked 1,400 the year before. So please, someone, anyone, come along and right this wrong. Alright, moving out of the Stone Ages to two players, Eric Dickerson and Lawrence Taylor, who set records on opposite sides of the ball in the 1980s and early 90s. Let's start with Dickerson's high single-season rushing record of 2,105 yards, which he set in 1984 as a member of the Los Angeles Rams, one of the most notorious records on this list and in league history. Dickerson's record has been a hot topic discussion over the last couple of decades, because we have seen a number of modern stars like Jamal Lewis, Chris Johnson, and most recently Derrick Henry make big-time runs at breaking this record. The closest anyone has come was Adrian Peterson in 2012 when he notched 2,097 rushing yards despite getting 31 less carries than Dickerson did. But nevertheless, it's still Dickerson's record. Although there is reason to believe that this is a tainted number. Dickerson played the bulk of his career during a time period when steroid usage ran rampant in professional sports. But at the time, there was still no formal testing or suspension policy in place for the NFL. And when you look at his production, well, it lends some credence to the theory that Dickerson and his freakish career might have been under the influence of performance-enhancing drugs. The NFL didn't start testing for steroids until 1987, and furthermore, they didn't roll out any sort of punishment policy until 1989. which just so happened to be the last season that Eric Dickerson resembled the bona fide Hall of Famer that he was during the first 6 years of his career. His yards per carry was also way down, eventually dipping below 4, a far cry from what fans came to expect from him when he was in the mid-4s. It's almost like something happened outside of the gridiron that caused his performance to tail off. Lawrence Taylor, who shares the record with J.J. Watt for most Defensive Player of the Year selections with 3, also falls under the shadow of suspected steroid use. He came into the league a couple years earlier than Dickerson, and wouldn't you know it, his last Pro Bowl season came in 1990. And he never recorded another double-digit sack year after that, again coinciding with the NFL's implementation of a steroid testing and punishment policy. That being said, even if Taylor wasn't a steroid user, there are plenty of other reasons that we don't need to acknowledge his accomplishments on the gridiron. Take, for example, some of his off-the-field exploits. Taylor admitted to recreational drug use throughout his NFL career, which resulted in him eventually being suspended at times by the league for failing drug tests. I don't know about you guys, but I'm more than happy to let J.J. Watt hold this record by himself and obliterate Taylor's name from the record books. Moving to a far more scrupulous and really beloved yet fearsome Giants pass rusher who has a tainted record of his own, Michael Strahan. Strahan played defensive end for the New York Giants beginning in 1993, coincidentally Taylor's last season with the team. And for the majority of his career, he was one of the most important players in the organization. That being said, far and away the best season of his career came in 2001 when he notched 73 tackles, the third best total of his career, forced 6 fumbles, and set the single-season sack record with 22.5. The only problem? Well, watch this clip and you tell me. What a poorly disguised, fake busted play and dive by Brett Favre on that last play. Of the last game of the season, no less. Favre, who was Strahan's longtime peer and friend, even admitted, telling Eric Bolling in an interview, "I ran a bootleg and he'd been crying, belly aching for his sack the whole game. So I had an option to run or hand it off, and I ran. I knew he's going to be there just to pace me, but he wasn't there. So I sort of slid and we had the game won, so the worst thing I could do was go out of bounds. So I just sort of ended up falling down." It's kind of tough to take the record seriously after hearing that. At least someone else, TJ Watt, shares it with him now. Continuing on in recent times, we've seen a couple of rather questionable records set, both in New England with Tom Brady and company, and in Denver, where his longtime adversary Peyton Manning played out the twilight of his career. Starting with the former, the only thing more unprecedented than New England's run of success and all the records they and the team's players broke during the past 2 decades is the scale and scope of cheating allegations that have loomed over the franchise throughout that same time frame. Whether it was Spygate, the Tuck Rule situation, or Deflategate, there have been countless allegations, which for sure tainted Tom Brady's career passing yards record of 84,520 as he played nearly his entire career for the Patriots. The reality is, with everything that went down in New England, scandal-wise, it's only fair to take the organization and its players' records with a tiny grain of salt. Moving on to Peyton Manning, he actually has 2 records that have come under fire after further investigation. First off, his inching out of Drew Brees' single-season passing yards record of 5,476 yards, which he beat by 1 yard. During a game against the Raiders, he completed a screen pass to Broncos wide receiver Eric Decker, which was scored on the field as a reception, and thus added 7 yards to Manning's total. But upon further review, it was actually a backwards pass, which should have made it a rush by Decker. The league, however, decided not to take away Manning's record, even though negating that reception would have put him second behind Brees, which, if you ask me, is rather arbitrary and sketchy. But this was not the only controversial record Manning set in 2013. He also broke the single-season touchdown mark, notching 55 that year. Now, admittedly, he still would have set the record, but it really should be 54. because the initial record-tying catch, again made by Eric Decker for number 51, was eventually disavowed by the NFL because they later realized that Decker was still juggling the catch when he went out of bounds.
Is it a touchdown?
No, it's not. That ball is moving before he gets both feet down. In fact, it's moving after he gets 1 foot down out of bounds.
Of course, because the refs dropped the ball here, the catch will forever count as a touchdown. But still, technically speaking, Manning really only had 54 touchdowns that year. But which NFL players' records do you think should be removed from the NFL record books? Did we miss anyone? Join us in the comment section below. If you like this video and learn a thing or two, clicking the like button helps out a ton. And hey, we appreciate it. If this is your first time coming around to TPS though, subscribing is a great idea because we put out videos like this every single day. But as always, thanks for watching and we'll see you guys next time.